My name is Olivia Shivas and I'm from New Zealand. I live in Auckland. I'm 27 years old and I am a journalist. I work at a big news website based in New Zealand, and so I am a digital producer. I work in the editorial area, writing, sub-editing, putting together articles, and then I also do some work in terms of like disability awareness in the community. I was born with a condition called muscular dystrophy. So basically, it's muscle weakness all throughout my body. There's lots of different types of it, but my specific type stays stable over time, whereas other ones, the muscles waste away. So yeah, I just do what I can to keep fit and healthy, and I do exercise and things like that, so I can maintain what independence and mobility I have. A big part of me, in my childhood was my disability, and how in my family we really embraced that, and we went to lots of disability camps and got involved with other organisations, and I think that was really good for me. I think what's different about me and my family is that my dad and my brother also have the same disability, so it's genetic condition, but I'm the only one who actually is a wheelchair user, so they can walk. My parents did what they could to get me involved with lots of things. I did horse riding and swimming and violin and singing and dancing and lots of different things. I guess when it comes to my own disability, I don't see it as something that's on me, but instead of how society is not inclusive of people with disabilities and people who have access needs or accessibility issues and things like that. And it's not that they intentionally want to exclude people with disabilities, but they're just ignorant into what people with disabilities can actually contribute if they were more accepting and inclusive of people with disabilities. So, for example, I'm not disabled because I can't walk up a flight of stairs, but I'm disabled because there's no ramp or there's no lift for me to actually access a building and be included. Every now and then I'll come across a situation where I'm like, oh yeah, I use a wheelchair, I can't access this space. So for example, a few weeks ago, my friend and I went out for a lunch at quite a fancy restaurant, and she booked it in advance online and just mentioned that I use a wheelchair just to make sure that they could have a table or an area that was just easily accessible. But when we showed up to the restaurant, there were like 5 stairs to get into the restaurant, and I was like, oh, where's the accessible entrance? And they're like, oh, this is the only entrance, we'll just like carry you up in your wheelchair. So that was a bit frustrating. So anyway, so the waiters carried me up the stairs, and once when they took us to our table, they had already like moved a chair out of the table so my wheelchair could go in straight away. So they were expecting someone in a wheelchair to come along, but they didn't think to let us know, oh, just to let you know in advance, like there's actually stairs to get into the restaurant before you actually get to the table. And they said, oh, well, we've got an accessible toilet on the inside. And it's like, how can a person with a disability like use your toilet if you don't even have like access to get inside the restaurant? So yeah, there's little cases like that which come up every so often. Yeah, and I guess it can be a bit of a bummer because for the most part I live such an independent life. I'm super, active in my job and in my community and on my hobbies and activities that I do. So it is annoying every now and then when you have that little like speed bump where you are reminded that people don't accept or see disability the same way you do. For me, not seeing a lot of people with disabilities in mainstream media and movies and in books and things like that, it was hard to find, I guess, a role model that I could relate to, because you do see stories and characters that have people with disabilities, but they weren't really anything that I could relate to. So you kind of like would have a spectrum of a person with a disability who you felt sorry for and had pity on them, and they were so sad that they had a disability, where on the other end you've kind of got these super inspiring, super disabled people who overcome the odds and that type of thing. But I couldn't really relate to any of those types of stories. So And I think that's probably one of the main reasons why I did want a career in media, was so that I could help change the narrative and be a person that another young version of me could relate to. Mum always tells me when I was younger, I always said I wanted to become famous, so, and be on TV. So maybe that was kind of the starting point of wanting to be a reporter and work in the media. Then when I was maybe like 10 or 11 years old, a friend and I, we recorded this radio show, and it was about a little girl and her pet dragon. And it was just our voices. It was like super basic, nothing fancy. And her mum said to me, "Oh, Olivia, you'd be a really good journalist one day." And to be honest, I probably didn't really know what that meant when I was that young, but I think it definitely planted a seed about what potential I had in my own life. Then I did a Bachelor of Communication Studies at university, and did my exchange in Finland, where I studied international journalism. While I was actually still studying, I had got a scholarship and also did an internship at this production company that makes documentaries about people with disabilities. And so my first full-time job was there, and it was a really good place to start my job because they were really inclusive already with people with disabilities. It was kind of quite a good way to enter the workforce, where I was able to kind of start my career without having to worry about my disability. So after I was at that company for a few years, then I was like, okay, time for me to head into mainstream media, and wanting to work, a bigger company. So so then I just applied for jobs just like anyone else does, and it was quite a bit, quite a long process. He had to face a lot of rejection, and I think one of the hardest parts was actually whether I disclosed I had a disability, because when I was, applying for jobs, because you didn't want that to affect the way a potential employer may see you as being valuable with your actual skills. And if I got rejected from a job, I'd automatically think, oh, maybe it was because I had a disability. And it shows that even I have a bit of like internal ableism, because that would be like my first response, but actually maybe they weren't interested because of something else, or they had a better candidate. The modelling came about through one of my friends, and she loves fashion, and she was buying some, I think she was wanting to buy some clothes online, but when she got them delivered, there were all these kind of hidden buttons, which meant that she needed help putting them on. So she has a disability herself, and so she decided to do something about it, and she wanting to feature clothes on a website that were accessible, and had more information about how they were accessible for people with disabilities. And so she also started a modelling agency, and has now got this whole basically communications and talent agency around disability and inclusion. So that's how I got involved with the modelling, and have done a couple of model shoots through them now. And then last year I was involved with New Zealand Fashion Week, and that was the first year that models with disabilities were involved throughout the whole show, and included just like any other model. So that was really exciting. I would have never thought that I would be involved in, a mainstream fashion show where I wasn't like made to feel like the token disabled person, because I guess these days the word diversity and inclusion, like, we use them all the time when we want to be able to cover all the diverse range of people that live in our community. But disability always seems to be at the very bottom of, the list of people wanting to include. And it's not really something celebrated, whereas other diverse groups seem to be much more celebrated. So for me, it was such a really amazing opportunity, just to see people with disabilities seen as being beautiful and being desirable. And you don't often see those types of stories. It was really, really exciting. And I think the best part of it was just hearing messages from other people with disabilities who felt empowered because of what I did at Fashion Week. So I was just very grateful for the opportunity. When I think about inspiration, it's kind of a love-hate relationship with that word, because I really am just living my life the way I want to, and with the things that I get involved with are things that I genuinely enjoy. I don't do it necessarily to inspire other people, but I can appreciate that some people do find people with disabilities inspiring. But I don't want to be like inspirational just because I have a disability and I'm able to do normal or ordinary things on top of having a disability, if that makes sense. I was getting out of my car, and I've got a ramp that comes out the back of the car, and it takes a little while to get in and out in my wheelchair. But this lady walked by and was just like watching me get out of my car, and she was like, "Wow, that's really cool. Your car looks amazing." And she said how she has a granddaughter who's in a wheelchair, and it was really encouraging to her to see an adult in a wheelchair who's still able to drive a car and do something so ordinary. So again, it comes back to seeing different types of stories. She probably had this perspective that people with disabilities can't drive cars before. That's why she was so surprised when she saw me drive a car. That's why we need to see different stories about people with disabilities, whether they're inspirational or not. And I think a lot of the stories we see about people with disabilities going through hardship, a lot of it is associated to do with their disability, but I think a lot of the stuff that people with disabilities actually do struggle with is not really to do with their disability. They may have a stressful time at university or in their job, or they're struggling to save for a house, or relationships and family issues and stuff like that. Like, people with disabilities go through that as well. It doesn't all come down to whether they're disabled or not. That's why it's so important to show a diverse range of stories.